aide in here, but we do have council aides from other offices, and I am sure that that her aides are also going to be watching. Again, I apologize that the room is too crowded. It's a good thing that people are so interested in this. The purpose of this meeting is to have a conversation, a facilitated conversation, to allow for us, the committee members, to allow invited speakers who are both in favor and opposed to the fluoridation of drinking water, so that we can address specific questions from the council and therefore enable our committee to be more deliberative in determining what action we should be taking. So I, again, appreciate that it's a little awkward. We're having a meeting, and you're sitting over there watching us have that meeting. Please understand that if there are things that you think any of us are not addressing or not looking at, you're absolutely encouraged to write to us after the meeting. But we aren't going to have citizen participation. This is just you watching a meeting that's going on. I want to thank our participants. I really appreciate their participation in this important discussion. And the rules of today are just going to be that, this is really about listening and having the committee members get to ask questions. I want to ask that all the participants respect the time. When the moderator indicates time is up, please honor that. We want to show respect for all points of view. That's really the reason why we're having this conversation. And we really do want to try to stay as on task as possible, respecting the objectives of this agenda. Again, I think that we have an excellent facilitator in Larry Schooler, who I'm going to turn the mic over to in just 1 second. I also want to let Larry know and point out to the rest of the group that at 10:30 or 10:45, I guess, at 10:45 we'll need to close because Mayor Pro Tem has an 11 o'clock engagement that's across town that he'll need to attend. And, of course, I can't conduct the meeting without a quorum. So with that, I pass the mic over to Larry, and I thank you for your willingness to lead us through this process.
Well, thank you very much, Councilmember. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here, and to those of you who are watching us on television or online, thank you for joining us as well. Let me quickly just introduce everyone who is before you today. Of course, Councilmember Shade is here. Mayor Pro Tem Mike Martinez is here as well. To my left, to most of you all's right, is Dr. Philip Wong, the Medical Director for the Austin-Travis County Health and Human Services Department. Dr. Wong, welcome. To my immediate right, we have Dr. Griffin Cole, a dentist with Fluoride-Free Austin. Welcome to you. Temporarily seated over there, he'll be moving over after his presentation, is Dr. Paul Connett, a professor of chemistry from St. Lawrence University and also with Fluoride-Free Austin. Dr. Connett, welcome. And over on my left, I have Dr. Cecil George, a family physician. Welcome to you, sir. And Dr. Delton Yarbrough, the chair of the Council on Dental Economics for the Texas Dental Association. Dr. Yarbrough, welcome to you. Okay, folks, as the council member indicated, this is a structured discussion between the two sides, and we will be observing time limits so that we ensure that everybody has equal opportunity to participate in the discussion. What I'll do is allow each side to open with about 10 minutes of an opening that they can divide up amongst their team members as they like. And, gentlemen, what I'll do is when there's 1 minute remaining in the time, I'll hold up my index finger. When there are 30 seconds, I'll hold up my fist. Don't mean to be militant about it, but there that is. And as the council member indicated, I know that both sides have a lot of feelings and experience on this issue, and it's very, very important that each side be able to complete their answer and complete their thought before the other side responds to it. Council member?
Yeah, it sounds like we have now achieved broadcast in the council chambers. So if there are people who want to watch this in the council chambers, you're welcome to do that as well. So besides the atrium, you've also got the option to sit in comfy chairs across the way in the council chambers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So again, folks, we'll be beginning with 10 minutes on a side with the 1 minute and 30-second warning. Does either side care to go first? Anybody have a preference? No preference? All right. So without further ado, we'll begin with Fluoride-Free Austin. You have 10 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I agreed with Griffin to take the whole 10 minutes of this part of the meeting. All the council members would by now have been sent a free copy of this case against fluoride, which I wrote with 2 other scientists. So everything I'm saying is backed up in that book. So the case against fluoride, first of all, you can't control the dose. You can control the concentration at the waterworks, but you can't control the dose. You can't control who gets the medicine. It goes to everyone, young, old, sick, malnourished, everybody. You're forcing it on people who don't want it, and thus violating their right to informed consent to medication. It's very expensive for the ordinary person, especially the low-income families, to avoid fluoride if they don't want it in their water. The evidence of any benefit is extremely weak, and there is no adequate margin of safety to protect all citizens from known harmful effects. In Austin, you add water between 0.6 and 0.8 parts per million fluoride, and that is 200 times the level in mother's milk. So a bottle-fed baby in Austin is getting 20,000% the level of fluoride that a breastfed baby would get. The evidence of benefit is very weak. The World Health Organization maintains a database for tooth decay in 12-year-olds, and you'll find that it's coming down as fast in non-fluoridated countries as fluoridated ones. And if you look at that graph, the red line, which has been circled, that's the U.S. figures. And to pretend, as the Center of Disease Control does, that line is coming down for tooth decay from the 60s to the 90s because of fluoridation is nonsense when you compare it with all those other countries which are non-fluoridated. If you compare U.S. communities, the largest survey of tooth decay ever conducted in the United States, looking at 39,000 children in 84 communities, they measured tooth decay as decayed, missing, and filled surfaces. To explain that, there are 4 surfaces on the cutting teeth, the top 6 and the bottom 6, and 5 surfaces on the chewing teeth. Altogether, by the time all the teeth have come out, there's 128 tooth surfaces. What they found was, on average, for 5 to 17-year-olds, 2.8 decayed, missing, and filled surfaces for children who lived all their lives in fluoridated communities, and 3.4 in the non-fluoridated communities. And if you subtract one from the other, that means the average saving for 5 to 17-year-olds is 0.6 of a tooth surface out of over 100 tooth surfaces in a child's mouth. Large studies from Australia have found even less saving than this, 0.12 to 0.3 tooth surfaces. Don't be fooled by savings given as percentages.
Could you speak in like the other mic, because other people aren't being able to hear them?
In this one? Okay. Is that better?
Might be a little better.
Okay. So don't be fooled by percentages. If you translate these differences in too small numbers, it's the vagary of doing just that. And the percentage can look high when the absolute saving of between 0.12 and 0.6 of a tooth surface is very small indeed. And there's growing evidence of harm. In the U.S., children are getting far too much fluoride. When they started this whole nonsense in 1945, they expected about 10% of the kids would get dental fluorosis, and in its very mild form. Now, according to the CDC, from last year, 41% of children between the ages of 12 and 15 have dental fluorosis, and not all in its very mild. 8.6% in the mild form, and 3.6% in the combined moderate and severe form. And I should also add that black Americans and Mexican Americans are more sensitive to fluoride's toxicity. They have higher rates of dental fluorosis than white children, and of course less able in low-income families to avoid fluoride if they don't want to. So the key question is, when fluoride is damaging the baby's growing tooth cells, causing this condition of dental fluorosis, what is it doing to the other developing tissues like the bone, the brain, and the endocrine system? Here, I will concentrate on the brain. In my view, the baby's brain should not be exposed to fluoride at 200 times the level in mother's milk. And this is what the National Research Council said in 2006. It is apparent that fluorides have the ability to interfere with the functions of the brain. That's their report from 2006, 507 pages, 1,100 references, and largely ignored and discounted by health authorities in all the fluoridating countries, including our own. Human studies. The NRC looked at 5 IQ studies, but now, as of this year, there are now 24 published studies indicating that moderate to high fluoride exposure is associated with lowered IQ in children. This is one of the most important studies. That they compared 2 villages, one with fluoride less than 0.7, average 0.36 parts per million, versus a village with 2.5 to 4.5 million parts per million of fluoride in their water. The average there was 2.47. They found a drop of 5 to 10 IQ points across the whole age range, and they found that the whole IQ curve was shifted for both males and females. And this is their curve. You see the black line there is the village with less than 0.7 parts per million, and the mauve curve is the village with between 2.5 and 4.5 parts per million. So you've got a whole shift of the IQ, which means you've got less intelligent children, very intelligent children, and more mentally handicapped. Now, Zhang estimated that IQ in children would be lowered at 1.9 parts per million of fluoride in the water. That's the threshold. That means there's an adequate margin of safety to protect all the children of a large population drinking water at 0.8 parts per million, like Austin. We need a safety factor of 10. And if you convert this concentration of 1.9 parts per million by assuming that on average the children were drinking 1 liter of water a day, then the lowest dose causing this harm is 1.9 milligrams per day. When you divide that by 10, you get a safe dose to protect everyone from this effect of 0.19 milligrams per day. Now, a dose of 0.19 milligrams a day would be exceeded by a child drinking 1 large glass of water at 0.8 parts per million. So there's no adequate margin of safety. The only way that U.S. health authorities are able to deal with this is to completely ignore these studies and not do any studies of their own. Ding, just last month, or a couple of months ago, they looked at levels much lower than this. The range of fluoride in the water was between 0.24 and 2.84 parts per million, actually embracing the range that we use in the United States. And they concluded, overall, our study suggested that low levels of fluoride exposure in drinking water had negative effects on children's intelligence. Low levels. Scientists from the EPA's National Health and Environmental Effects Research Laboratory have classified fluoride, as with lead, as a chemical having substantial evidence of developmental neurotoxicity. Two preposterous notions. What parent in their right mind would put their children's teeth above their brains? And what government would support a program aimed at lowering tooth decay by at most 0.6 of one tooth surface if it lowered the IQ of the population by even a small amount? Well, you know the answer to that, the United States. Other health concerns are documented in the chapters 13 and 19 in our book. Now, an explanation for the weak evidence of benefit is the concession by the Center for Disease Control in 1999 and again in 2001 that the major benefits of fluoride are topical. It works on the outside of the tooth, not from inside the body. Clearly, this was a point when fluoridation should have ended, because if it works on the outside of the teeth, fluoridated toothpaste is universally available, and if you use that approach of direct topical application, you don't expose the whole body, all your tissues, to a toxic substance, and you don't expose people to this substance who don't want to be exposed, which most of the people in this room are in that category. Now, the Reverend Andrew Young, you know who he was. He was an assistant to Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., former mayor of Atlanta, former U.S. ambassador. He said, "I am most deeply concerned for poor families who have babies. If they cannot afford unfluoridated water for their baby's milk formula, do their babies not count? Of course they do. This is an issue of fairness, civil rights, and compassion. We must find better ways to prevent cavities, such as helping those most at risk for cavities obtain access to the services of a dentist." And I should point out that 80% of dentists in the United States do not treat children on Medicaid. Andrew Young continuing, "My father was a dentist. I formerly was a strong believer in the benefits of water fluoridation for preventing cavities. But many things that we began to do 50 or more years ago, we now no longer do because we have learned further information that changes our practices and policies. So it is with fluoridation." And a few days ago, Beatrice, Martin Luther King's daughter, also came out opposing water fluoridation. There are better alternatives. If you want fluoride, use fluoridated toothpaste. Give free toothbrushes, free toothpaste to low-income families. Most of toothpaste is concentrated in low-income families. Low-income families need better diet, better dental education, and better access to dentists. Less sugar, more brushing. Less sugar means less tooth decay and less obesity, less diabetes, fewer heart attacks. Education is the better investment, not fluoridation, for Austin. Thank you.
Very much, sir. If you would mind taking your seat up here at the front. and the Texas Dental Association.
Yes. My name is Dr. Delton Yarbrough, and I chair the council, the TDA's Council on Dental Economics. The council is charged with dealing with community oral health issues. Water fluoridation falls within that realm. A little bit about myself. I grew up in a small town in West Texas, Fort Stockton. After I graduated from dental school in 1980, I went back and practiced there, and I've practiced there for 31 years. And the fluoride content of the water is 0.9 parts per million, naturally fluoridated on the low end. It has historically been as high as 1.4 parts per million. The overwhelming weight of credible scientific evidence shows that there is a direct relationship between fluoride levels in the drinking water and the prevention of dental decay. Science tells us that. The first U.S. city that fluoridated was Grand Rapids, Michigan, in 1945, and the children who consumed the fluoridated water from birth had 50 to 60% less decay than before the fluoridation started. The overall effectiveness of water fluoridation in preventing the tooth decay has been established at 19 to 40%. And the scientific evidence has consistently indicated that fluoridation of community water is safe and effective for both children and adults. Community water fluoridation is the process of adjusting the natural level of fluoride in the water. All groundwater contains fluoride at some level in its natural form. And the recommended therapeutic level is 0.7 milligrams per liter, or 7 parts per million. That recommendation is to protect against tooth decay. It's an oral health issue. And optimally fluoridated water is not toxic and is not harmful. It makes the tooth structure more resistant to decay in children and adults, and it does it throughout the whole lifespan. A review by the U.S. Task Force on the Community Preventative Services reported that water fluoridation reduces tooth decay by 30 to 50% in children and adolescents. And a study that was published in the Journal of Dental Research in 2007 found that fluoridation prevents 27% of cavities in adults. The former U.S. General, David Satcher, in May of 2000 stated that fluoridation continues to be the most cost-effective, practical, and safe means for reducing and controlling the outcome of dental decay in a community. And as of 2008, over 72% of the U.S. population on public water systems receive optimally fluoridated water. That's 195.5 million people. And since 2000, there have been more than 310 U.S. communities in 40 states that have voted to adopt or retain their fluoridation programs. From an ethics standpoint, the U.S. courts have consistently ruled that water fluoridation is not a form of compulsory mass medication or socialized medicine. It is simply the adjustment of the natural fluoride level in the groundwater to optimum therapeutic levels to help prevent tooth decay. And in 1999, the Centers for Disease Control named fluoridation of drinking water as one of 10 great public health achievements of the 20th century. And fluoridation of community water supplies is the single most effective measure to prevent dental decay because the fluoride is incorporated throughout the whole tooth structure. More than 100 national and international health, science, service, professional organizations recognize and endorse the public health benefits of community water fluoridation for preventing dental decay. The water fluoridation in communities benefits everyone, especially those that do not have access to regular dental care. And the average cost for a community to fluoridate its water is between 50 cents and $1 per year per person in larger communities to $3 per year per person in small communities. And the studies have shown that for every dollar spent on fluoride, it saves about $40 in dental treatment. And there are literally thousands of epidemiological, clinical, socioeconomic, laboratory studies that have been conducted over the 65-year history of the fluoridation of community water supplies. Those studies confirm its safety and effectiveness. This is an exceptional record, considering the torrent of criticism, the unsubstantiated scientific claims, and activist groups that have questioned this. It's come under great scrutiny, and the science has continually and consistently verified that fluoride ion in the water at therapeutic levels is safe and effective at greatly reducing the incidence of dental decay in the population. Now, outside of that, as a practicing dentist in an area where the fluoride content of the water on the low end is 0.9 parts per million, I don't really need the benefit of science to know how effective fluoride in the water is. I see it every day. Every day I go to work, patients open their mouth, I see it. There is a clinically observable difference between the native West Texans, the people that have grown up there, and people who are not indigenous or native to that area. And we see the whole spectrum because we're an oil field community, and we see, especially in this economy, we're seeing people from New York and Louisiana and the northern border. They're coming in to work on the oil rigs. We see migrant workers from Mexico. And consistently, when the patient opens their mouth, if I see those little white splotches, little white wavy lines that they didn't even know were there until I told them, I see a much, much lower incidence of filled, restored teeth, root canals, crowns, and it's not because their oral hygiene is good. It's not because they're brushing their teeth and flossing. Some of them are lucky if they find the floss once a week. It's because of the fluoride in the water. On the flip side of that, patient opens their mouth and we see fillings everywhere. We see crown, we see root canals, and I don't see the little splotchy white places and the little wavy lines on the teeth. And I ask those patients, where did you grow up? In Louisiana. I saw one yesterday, the exact scenario. And she said, Doctor, I spent half my life in the dental chair when I was growing up. And it wasn't because she wasn't taking care of her teeth. I mean, she wouldn't have had all that dental work in there if she hadn't been taking care of her teeth. Her oral hygiene was good. But she had a mouthful of restorations and work that had been done, and she had no fluorosis visible in the tooth enamel. And so, the difference is that we see in those scenarios, it is the fluoride in the water. That's what it is. And it works, and it's been proven over and over.
Dr. George, we have a couple minutes remaining.
This is an issue with fluoride. I'm sorry.
Have to push that button.
I don't have to keep it down all the time. Okay.
Push that.
It's the issue that we deal with all the time. Turn it off. The issue that we deal with all the time in any kind of health care, in any chemical that we put into our body. Any chemical, even our beneficial medications at inappropriate levels are toxic. An excellent example of this is the medication warfarin. Warfarin, that's rat poison, right? Okay. It's also a very beneficial medication that helps to prevent and treat blood clots. And over decades, we have had studies, well-conducted scientific methodology that show the benefits of Coumadin and also that have developed the appropriate therapeutic levels. The same thing has happened with fluoride. The appropriate therapeutic levels have been studied and studied and studied. We've got 65 years' worth of experience with it. And the benefits are well demonstrated with little, if any, toxic effects at the appropriate therapeutic level.
Thank you both very much.
Larry, are we allowed to ask questions?
You are, Councilmember. What I'm going to do, though, I think, is bring forward the questions we talked about in advance, just so that each side can respond to those. And then, as needed, I certainly would appreciate your interjections. So Folks, what we'll be doing from here on is allowing 2 minutes aside to respond to some questions submitted in advance by the council offices. And so if Fluoride-Free Austin doesn't object, I was going to let the Texas Dental Association have first go this round. And gentlemen, just as a way to continue the conversation, as you listen to some of the points made by Fluoride-Free Austin, and as you think about the most important points you want to make this morning, what would you identify as the most critical points for Fluoride-Free Austin to understand that you're not sure they yet understand?
To me, one of the things I'm most concerned about. There, am I on? Okay. One of the things that most concerns me is they do not recognize the systemic benefits of fluoride in the tooth structure. That the fluoride is incorporated into the entire tooth structure, and so it's not just a topical application. And we see that, and I can, vouch for that in clinical practice. When you get exposed root surfaces, they're more prone to decay, and you'll see a slower rate of decay on the root surface in individuals that have consumed fluoridated water throughout their lifespan versus those who have not. And cervical decay is a real issue, especially in the elderly, as the gum tissue recedes. And it's troubling that they don't recognize that fluoride ion is incorporated into the entire tooth structure.
Dr. George, anything? And I'm sorry, I'm picking up some feedback. I know it's not my phone because I've turned it off of the mode. So folks that have cell phones near a microphone, if you could adjust that. Dr. George, anything else?
I think, to reiterate, we need to approach any issue where we put a substance in our bodies. We need to approach it from a true scientific approach with well-designed, well-controlled, peer-reviewed studies that show the benefits outweigh the risks. That's the only thing that I would want them to recognize.
Thank you both very much. 2 minutes for Fluoride-Free Austin. Same question. The most critical points for the other side to understand.
Yeah, I just wanted to address a couple of points on the scientific studies because I've looked at them as well. I'm a dentist, 18 years in practice, and all of the studies have one major flaw that they never really talk about, and that is you can't account for all the citizens who are relocating between non-fluoridated and fluoridated. They don't talk about home care. They don't talk about diet. It's always based on this is fluoridated and this is not. And the results that they always get are so close that it's really insignificant as far as what's better, being fluoridated or non. Beyond that, John Featherstone in 2000 in the JADA mag, which is the one that all the dentists read, showed that there was virtually no effect systemically that was beneficial to the teeth at all. It was all topical. I thought that was the end of fluoridation because this was in our magazine. It was boldly stated, no effect systemically. We know it incorporates in the tooth. The problem is that how it incorporates is it makes the tooth more brittle. It changes the collagen makeup of it. And that's the issue. If you want to apply it topically to get some kind of anti-carcinogenic effect, go for it. But to think that if you swallow it, it's going to be beneficial to your teeth is not true. And we've now shown this in hundreds of studies, correct? Mm-hmm. So, I think it needs to be made up. And on the Grand Rapids thing, because that was the first big test, it was between Grand Rapids, Michigan, which was fluoridated, and Muskegon, which was non. They started this study. After a couple of years, they were excited about the results, and they just ended it. This is in the Freedom of Information Act. They never even finished the study. The bandwagon had already started rolling. It was exciting, and they just went with it. So that study was never even completed. So I don't even like to quote that one because I think that's where things went awry early on.
As far as talking about true science, I absolutely agree with you. I'm a scientist. But listening to the presentation from the other side, we heard about endorsements and we heard a lot about anecdotal evidence. Neither is scientific. We were told about thousands of studies.
Excuse me, sir. Please complete your thought. The time has expired. Sorry about that. Yeah, I was trying to signal to you. We had 2 minutes aside on the question. Let me just interject here for a moment and ask, is JADA the Journal of the American Dental Association? There are people watching with far less experience in this field than the participants. So to the extent we can avoid acronyms, I think it might be beneficial for everybody to understand what you're mentioning. Council members Shade and Mayor Pro Tem Martinez, were there questions that you had at this time that you wanted to add to the conversation?
Well, do you want to? I guess one of the questions that I had was on the slide that you presented with the two communities. I don't remember the names of them. They were Asian communities.
It was
Zhang.
Yeah.
And so I wondered if we could look at that slide again, because I had a question about it.
Go ahead, I'll find it.
And once Fluoride-Free Austin answers the council member's question, TDA will have a chance if they want to add anything.
What I was going to ask about it was comparing the two levels, and I was okay, that's the one. So I mean, again, the point being that 2.5 to 4.5, that's toxic levels by anybody's stretch of the imagination, right?
No, that's where the margin of safety comes in. And also, please note that Zhang said that the threshold at which this effect was observed was 1.9 parts per million, which is uncomfortably close. You know, normally, when you find a toxic effect, this is a small study group of 512 children. When you find a toxic effect in a small study group, your job is to determine what is safe for the whole population. And that's the whole population of the United States, is a lot of people. And this 500 children was fairly homogeneous. They were all Chinese. They all had the same nutrition, essentially. Basically, very, very homogeneous. But when we're protecting the whole population, we have to take into account the different ethnic groups in the country, different nutritional status, different health status. There's so many things. So normally, the routine is to assume that you need a safety factor of 10, that's called interspecies variation, to take into account the whole range of sensitivity in a human population. And as such, 1.9 parts per million offers no protection to the children, all the children drinking fluoridated water in Austin.
Okay. And what is the, so our fluoride threshold is what?
What's our level here in Austin?
I'll let her.
Our goal is 0.7 parts per million.
Sorry.
I'm Jane Barazer, Assistant Director with Austin Water. Our the EPA standard is 4 parts per million. They have a secondary standard of 2 parts per million, but our goal and our range in Austin is 0.7 parts per million.
But that, if I may, Madam Chairman, point out, this brings me back to the first question. You can control the concentration, but you can't control the dose. So a child, for example, drinking 2 liters of water at 1 part per million is going to get more fluoride than a child drinking 1 liter at 1.9 parts per million. So you need a really strong safety factor when you can't control how much water kids are drinking and how much fluoride they're getting from other sources. That's the fatal flaw of fluoridation, the fatal flaw of using the public water supply to deliver medicine. You can't control the dose.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Yeah, and I was going to apply the same, because you were talking about the naturally occurring in Fort Stockton, which, by the way, I've spent a fair amount of time in Fort Stockton. I actually like Fort Stockton and love West Texas. But does that mean that there's no additional fluoridation to the water because it's in such high natural occurring levels?
Yes, that is correct.
Press it. The green light.
Leave it green, and then it'll. If you leave it green.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I had to hold it down.
No.
Okay, I'm just a dentist. I'm not. Yes, the water that we use comes from an aquifer. The city's water source is well water, and for years we used the well water straight out of the aquifer. It wasn't diluted or changed in any way. It was very high in other minerals, especially magnesium. If you're not used to it, you got to be careful drinking it, or you'll end up staying in the bathroom for a period of time.
High concentration of magnesium salts, like milk of magnesia, is high concentration of magnesium salts.
Right, but to address what happened was they built a prison out there, and when they tested the water was good enough for us, but it wasn't good enough for the prisoners. It was too hard. So they built a reverse osmosis plant, and they mix 50% of that reverse osmosis water with the natural groundwater, which reduced the fluoride level to 0.9 parts per million. We get the yearly water quality reports that every community gets, and I've never seen it below 0.9 parts per million.
Okay. And so just as a follow-up, this idea of controlling the concentration versus the dose, I mean, where is the point where a dose is too damaging? And I realize it's different for different kinds of people depending on their condition, but I mean, when you extrapolate, the average person may be drinking 8 glasses of water. Can you speak to that concept of?
Well, I suspect the average person doesn't drink 8 glasses of water. If they did, they would spend a great deal of time in the bathroom.
I mean, but I mean, typically I hear that from doctors. In fact, that was a question that we had at an earlier conversation. Was
the average person probably doesn't drink 8 glasses of water.
But it is a recommendation by a lot of people that you get 8 glasses of water a day, and I realize that maybe not everybody does that. I know there's lots of recommendations not everybody follows, but that was actually a question that I had earlier when we were looking at why the concentration was recommended to be lowered earlier in the year, was because we assumed that in part people were drinking more water because it's been part of what's been encouraged by doctors over the years, that we drink more water, and so. But I don't really have a sense for, I understand the concept of concentration versus dose, but I don't really understand how, is there any kind of correlation for, yeah, please.
Just use a round number. 1 milligram per liter, or 1 part per million, means that if you consume 1 liter of water, you're consuming 1 milligram of fluoride ion. The toxic dose is 10 milligrams. I mean, that's lethal, okay? When I say toxic, I guess it depends on who you talk to. So, if you drink 10 liters of water,
Okay. I didn't know that.
That kind of gives you an idea.
Right. And I do recognize that some people have different issues. I mean, that I was really, so the average person, is not going to.
I misused the word toxic in their definition. I'm talking about.
Okay.
That could cause.
So and then I'll let Mike ask his questions. But the other question that I had was really this idea of the entire tooth versus the topical that you raised, and I wanted to hear what the other side had to speak to that.
Well, first of all, 8 glasses of water is 2 liters, and some people definitely drink more than 2 liters of water a day. In fact, as you've said, the Institute of Medicine actually recommends 3 liters of water a day. People working outside in a hot climate drink a lot of water. I was in Western Australia, and the miners there were drinking 10 to 12 liters of water a day, working outside in a hot climate. So again, you can't control the dose. And talking about average people is not the point. If you put a toxic substance in the drinking water, you have to protect everyone. This is your practice, and you've got to assure the public that everyone is protected. You can't go around saying, well, this is fine, this is a wonderful practice, but only drink 2 liters of water, or don't drink more than 2 liters of water. It's utterly preposterous. Again, you can't control the dose. You can control the concentration, but that's not the relevant thing. And as far as toxic doses are concerned, it's well lower than 10 milligrams. We have studies from China which indicate an increase in hip fractures at about 6 milligrams per day. And it's not just the dose that causes harm on the day. You're getting this for a lifetime. You're doing this every day. And 50% of that fluoride is accumulating in your bones over a lifetime. So what is it doing to your bones over a lifetime? Increasing hip fractures, increasing the incidence of arthritis, we believe, although the U.S. has not done it.
But the question is about the topical versus the whole tooth.
Okay, yeah, but I was just responding to their answers.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Because I think we're going to have equal time on the responses.
Okay.
You were.
Yeah. So you want to comment on the topical?
Can you ask your question again on the topical? Because I got involved in his answer.
Yeah, me too. And but the question was just, you're talking about the topical, and the other side is saying it's more. You need to look at the whole tooth structure and not just the topical. And
I don't believe there's a single clinical trial, randomized, true trial, that proves that drinking fluoride benefits the teeth. It's not been done. There's plenty of studies out there that will show, well, look, this community is fluoridated and this one's not. Better decay rates. That's not showing us the science.
No, they've never done a randomized clinical trial. You're absolutely right. And the study done by Warren from Iowa, which is a U.S. government-funded study, they did something unusual. Instead of comparing communities drinking different levels of fluoride in the water, they actually calculated how much fluoride the children were ingesting. And when they found that, they found there was no relationship with tooth decay and the amount of fluoride that was ingested in the groups of children. And incidentally, when we come to tooth studies, all the studies I cited have been coming from pro-fluoridation researchers and pro-fluoridation agencies. I haven't cited a single study here on tooth decay from opponents of water fluoridation. Their own studies indicate that it just simply doesn't work.
Okay,
let me come back to TDA for a moment.
Okay.
It might be noted that, you hear, they say these studies aren't validated. We say those studies aren't validated. The studies that he's quoting out of China, Dr. Connett paid to have those studies translated and brought out of China, and the modalities of those studies have been questioned. So, it comes down to, who do you believe? Who, do you believe us? Do you believe them? And, do you believe the gigglers in the audience? Who do you believe? Okay. And the thing is, where the rubber hits the road, that means when the patient's rear end's in the dental chair and they open their mouth, what do we see? We're the ones that deal with it. We're the ones that deal with the fallout and the issues of no fluoridation in the water. The physicians, if what they're saying is true, and Dr. George can validate this, and I'll let him say so, that, everybody be walking around with pinned hips and et cetera, and low IQs. I consumed fluoridated water from the time I was 3 years old until now, which is a long time, and I still think my IQ is pretty good. And so, but I'll let Dr. George address the other part of that.